support and guidance to children, and particularly young boys, to give them a sense of all of their greatness and all of their possibility. So there's a great set of initiatives that have been put together to make sure that we provide that support. And this program we're launching now is called the Mentors Matter Initiative. It says it all. Mentors matter. They make a huge difference in the lives of children. They elevate kids and give them hope. And this is going to be a difference maker for a lot of New York City kids. So here to tell you more about it, as someone who's devoted to our children and their future, the Executive Director for the Young Men's Initiative, Jordan Stockdale. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a former East Harlem Middle School teacher, I can understand the challenges our students and families are facing during this time. During this and employment programs, and programs to help our justice-involved brethren. Today's announcement, the Mentors Matters Initiative, has 3 parts. First, 100 Black men and YMI will partner to expand its Junior 100 program to at least 750 Black and brown male students this year. The program will provide mentoring and educational enrichment, as well as expose students to career opportunities and offer financial scholarships for post-secondary education. Second, we will expand CUNY Tutor Corps to offer academic tutoring and near-to-peer mentoring to 3,600 additional DOE students. CUNY students who are within the New York City Men Teach program will be prioritized for this paid opportunity. These students are all males of color who are succeeding in their college programs and who are ready to impart wisdom on a slightly younger version of themselves. Lastly, YMI will issue $500,000 in grants to local community-based organizations that offer tutoring, mentoring, and social-emotional support to at least 4,000 students during this difficult time. The application period for the funding opportunity opens September 21st and closes October 5th. You can learn more at nyc.gov/YMI funding.
Thank you very, very much, Jordan. Thank you for all you are doing. And everyone who's going to be a part of this initiative, just want to say thank you. It takes a lot of heart and a lot of love and a lot of commitment to help bring along our young people, but they feel that sense of investment and concern. They feel when adults believe in them. They really can tell. And they can tell when they are not believed in, and that's one of the problems, the negative signals that our society for too many years, decades, has sent to young men of color. This initiative is part of turning that around and showing they are loved and they are believed in, and it makes all the difference. So thank you. Thank you very much. Now, everyone, we talked about a lot of things going on with our schools and our young people, but now it's important to be reminded of something that affects all of us, the census. Look at this clock running right here, 9 days left. The census that determines so much of the future of this city, our communities, things that will affect your life directly. We only have 9 days left. Now, the census team has been fighting the most extraordinary odds in the middle of a pandemic, with the federal government trying to undermine the census, with the President of the United States trying to discourage immigrants from participating. All of this has been thrown at our census team But this team is tough and resilient, just like New York City. They keep fighting back. They're doing an amazing job reaching people all over the city on the ground. Shirlene and I had the joy of being with the census team out in Canarsie a few days ago in Brooklyn. And it was a really exciting, positive experience, because when people felt the energy of the census team, they were willing to take the time to fill out that census. When they heard how important it was, they got involved. So we're doing that now all over the city. Now, New York City keeps moving forward. Now our self-response rate is at 60%. We have got to keep going. The national average is 66%. We got 9 days left to see how far we can go and to push farther. Now, here's an interesting fact. I mean, you can see on your screen there where New York City is this year compared to 10 years ago, when there was no federal government trying to stop the census, no attacks on immigrants and attempts to scare them off, no pandemic. You can see this team has gotten New York City almost to the point where we were 10 years ago, and they have still 9 days, and they're fighting hard to go even farther. But look at the rate for the country. Again, 66% now. That gap was much greater 10 years ago, and that's what matters. Remember, the census is graded ultimately proportionally. How do we do compared to the rest of the country really determines the levels of representation in Congress we get, the amount of funding we get. Again, don't think about it abstractly. Think about money for your kid's school, money for your subway line, money that makes sure people can get affordable housing. Think about the people in your life who need affordable housing and the federal money that comes in for that. It's all determined by the census. So how you stand versus the rest of the nation determines your share. 10 years ago, look at that, a gap of almost 14% between New York City and the nation. This time only 6%, and we were the epicenter of the crisis, and yet we've fought back. So kudos to the whole census team. But again, everyone, we've only got 9 days left. Everyone needs to help now. 9 days to go. The team is out across the 5 boroughs. They're taking all sorts of actions to draw attention to the census, get people involved. 100 different events and actions planned in the next 9 days, focusing on neighborhoods that have the lower response rates in the city. That includes Wakefield, Corona, Richmond Hill, Jamaica, East New York, Cypress Hills, Canarsie, and the North Shore of Staten Island. All those areas we're going to put extra attention into. So that means anywhere people are, that the subway, the bus, if they're at a shopping center, if they're at a food pantry, wherever people are, you're going to see the census folks out. And they're doing an incredible texting campaign, texting 750,000 New Yorkers, a digital campaign, TV, radio, a whole host of approaches, 25 different languages. I mean, this is an amazing, amazing effort. So again, everyone, you can make such a difference here, you yourself, by simply taking that 10 minutes to fill out the census. And if you want to help, us get this done and make sure the census comes in strong. A lot of people say, what can I do to help? How can I help New York City? Here's how you can help. You can join up to help us get people involved and engaged and get them to take the time to fill out that census. Go to nyc.gov/GOTC, nyc.gov/GOTC, and you can help with your family, with your neighborhood, to get people to sign up for the census, and we can go farther, and we can make sure New York City gets our fair share. Okay, let's talk about our indicators. Number one, daily number of people admitted to New York City hospitals for suspected COVID-19 threshold is 200 patients, and today's report, 51. And the positivity rate among those patients is 11.5%. Number two, new reported cases on a 7-day average. Threshold is 550 cases. Today's report, 316. And number three, percentage of people testing positive citywide for COVID-19. Threshold is 5%. And look at that chart. Look how this has stayed so low thanks to your efforts. That's a beautiful representation of what the people of New York City have achieved. So today, 1% even, literally 1.0%. Let's keep it at that level or even drive it down further. We have shown we can do it. Let's keep going. A few words in Spanish. Hoy tenemos el primer día de clases en persona desde marzo. Nuestra ciudad ha puesto la salud y la seguridad primero para todos los estudiantes, maestros y personal escolar. Y recuerden que quedan 9 días para llenar el censo. Todos debemos participar y además recordar a nuestros amigos y vecinos de llenar el censo. With that, let's turn to our colleagues in the media, and please let me know the name and outlet of each journalist.
We'll now begin our Q&A. As a reminder, we're joined today by Chancellor Carranza, Commissioner LaRocca, Dr. Katz, Corporation Counsel Jim Johnson, Census Director Julie Menon, the Deputy Chancellor for Early Childhood and Enrollment Josh Wallach, Jordan Stockdale, the Executive Director of the Young Men's Initiative, and Senior Advisor Dr. Jay Varma. First question today goes to Andrew Siff from NBC.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Last week, before you pushed the start of school back, I asked you how confident you were that things would begin on time, and you said, of course, things were going to open. We now know after your meeting with the labor leaders, it got pushed. So I'm going to ask it again with regard to next week. Now that you have the Situation Room, the Emergency Command Center, the new protocols, and the labor leaders' conversation, how confident are you that September 29th will be a go for the higher grades?
I'm very confident, Andrew. We have seen some really, really good results over the last few days. And this morning, strong liftoff, and you heard it's a huge number of schools and early childhood programs, and they're starting strong. So I feel very good about the trajectory we're on. Go ahead. Andrew?
You probably, yes, can you still hear me?
Yep.
Hello, you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, different topic. This is about New York being designated a jurisdiction of anarchy. This was, of course, on the Justice Department website this morning. I'm wondering, what is the net effect of that? Is it pure politics, or does this actually mean something for New York City since the federal funding had already been withheld?
I'm going to start, and I'm going to turn to our Corporation Counsel, Jim Johnson. Why don't we cut off that background noise there? I was out in Elmhurst, Queens this morning. I saw peace, tranquility. I saw people going about their business, people excited that it's the first day of school. I saw anything but anarchy. So this is just another one of President Trump's games. It's thoroughly political. It's part of his campaign strategy. It makes no sense. It's not based in the facts in the least. It's insulting to the people of New York City. And his effort to withhold our funding is unconstitutional. And with that, I'll turn to a real expert, someone who, before he became our corporation counsel, served at the highest levels of the federal government and fully understands the relationship between the federal government and our cities, our corporation counsel, Jim Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And you are absolutely right. The president does not have the authority to change the will of Congress. We are preparing to and will be prepared to fight this in court if ultimately, because this has to go through a number of steps, he actually takes concrete steps to withdraw federal funds. And not only is it unconstitutional, the designation of anarchy doesn't even pass a common sense test. And if need be, we can send, in addition to our legal filings, a dictionary, because what we have in New York is not anarchy, and what we have is a city moving forward under difficult circumstances, made more difficult because of the threats to withdraw federal funding.
Thank you, Jim.
The next is Bridget from WNYC.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Bridget, how you doing?
I'm good. Just some follow-up questions on schools today. I wanted to start with Learning Bridges, the child care program that was supposed to be priority for DOE employees. We've been hearing from some teachers who actually had to teach today that they haven't gotten the updates they need to the program, and our own inquiries haven't really gotten any response. So I'm just wondering, beyond the email address you shared, can you tell us more about what's happening and what advice you have for teachers who are maybe scrambling for childcare today?
Yeah, Bridget, look, we want to make sure that we accommodate as many people as possible. It's a brand new initiative that was built in response to the pandemic conditions, and we've dealt with the challenges we've dealt with everywhere else, having to create the social distancing and find appropriate space, make sure it's healthy and safe. So everything's harder in a pandemic, to say the least, but the team has really worked hard to build out tens of thousands of seats for kids in childcare, in Learning Bridges. And that process will continue, and it will keep growing over these next few months. So let me turn to the Chancellor and to Deputy Chancellor Josh Wallach, and they can talk about how we're going to do everything we can to accommodate teachers and to make sure people have someone they can turn to get the answers to their questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll start, and then I'll ask Deputy Chancellor Wallach to add. There are 3,600 early childhood Learning Bridges seats that are available right now. So notifications should have already started going out. And I'm going to ask Deputy Chancellor Wallach to talk a little bit more detail about what folks can do if they're looking to find out where is my application. Josh?
Thank you. That's absolutely right. We started this week with our preschool slots. And by the beginning of next week, we will have services available for tens of thousands of families. We'll be up to 30,000 Learning Bridges slots across the city. Sites in every borough. We have 57 operating today, and will be more by next week. I think if families are asking questions, offers will be going out this week more every day. We are, as the Mayor and Chancellor said, working nonstop to get these sites stood up, and we will have thousands more stood up with each passing day. So if you have a question about your particular application and you email learningbridges@schools.nyc.gov, we will get you an update very quickly. And as the Mayor and Chancellor said, we are setting up the seats first for the families that need them most. Priorities do include families in shelter, families that are working in our New York City school system, and other families of essential workers. And so we're working to set those up as quickly as we can. We will get you updates as fast as we can, and we will stand this up over the coming weeks.
Josh, let me just push this question one more point on the specific thing of employees of the DOE, teachers, staff, getting an actual specific answer. Can you just give us a sense of the kind of turnaround time, whether they're going to get a specific email back or a call from someone? What time turnaround? Because obviously people are worried right now to get those things resolved. What kind of turnaround time?
Absolutely. So the turnaround time, if you email learningbridges@schools.nyc.gov, we'll get back to you with a status update within 48 hours. And children of DOE school and program staff are a priority group. So we'll be among the first families to be served when we do have seats in your area. And we will let you know where we stand on that and what that prospect looks like when you email us.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bridget. Bridget, can you hear me?
Oh, now I can hear you.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Can either the Chancellor or someone talk a little bit more about this new building captain's role that was announced today? What DOE staff's responsibilities will be? Is it something beyond just taking attendance? We've been getting some questions from folks trying to understand what this role is all about.
Go ahead.
Sure, Bridget. So I don't know what announcement was made about building captains. There really is no announcement. Every year at the start of school, we have central staff, several layers deep, that are assigned to a school site to assist, to problem solve, to assist the principal. They're not there to take attendance. What they're there to do is to facilitate problem solving, because start of school, you always have things that will happen. This is no different. So we have building captains that have spread out across all of the sites that open for in-person learning today. Their role is to be there to assist, to help facilitate anything, whether it's the procurement of more PPE or it's helping with organizing and making sure that they have all of their supplies. Again, they're there to assist. They're not there to take attendance.
Thank you.
The next is Yoav from the city.
Yeah, hi everyone. I wanted to ask about the number of teachers that are going to be needed for middle schools and high schools. Trying to figure out why that number is still unknown at this point. At what point do you intend to come up with a number? And is that going to leave you enough time to do all the hiring that's necessary?
Yeah, Yoav, look, I think it's understandable. Anyone would say, why is this so complex? Excuse me. And I think what we have to understand is the realities of the pandemic, meaning we have had extremely unusual circumstance. Teachers applying for medical accommodation, that's been on a rolling basis. Families deciding whether to opt in, opt out, that's been on a rolling basis. The work being done in each school. We've had really good results in terms of the number of schools and classrooms ready to go. We had only one building that wasn't. But still, you've had to make adjustments around classrooms. And then when you add in that, you have the realities of in-person education, blended remote education, full-time remote education. It's a lot for everyone to mix and match all these factors. They never had to do anything like this before. So we all want it to be resolved, and it will be resolved. But I do want to say to everyone in the school system, they've been dealing with extremely complex dynamics. But what has been made clear to the principals is they can hire people to fill those vacancies, and if they need help, there are DOE employees being applied to their schools, certified teachers being sent in where there's a gap. There are substitute teachers being hired. There are education students being hired. And I see the pieces coming together. That's really the simplest way to say it. It's been a lot of complexity, but it's moving. Go ahead.
Okay. I guess on a different issue, I wanted to ask about the food reserve that you established back in April with the $50 million. So our understanding is that a decision was made essentially to begin distributing most of that food, in part because of the need at pantries. But it also seems like the decision was made that a food reserve of that nature is no longer necessary. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, given kind of what seems like an increasing number of kind of emergencies and natural disasters. Are you planning on continuing some kind of reserve along those lines?
Yeah, Yoav, it's a great question. I appreciate this question because it gets back to why we established it to begin with. I try to always tell people what I'm seeing, but I also try and help people see the good along with the bad. There was a point in March where I was getting increasingly concerned about the supply chain around the country and what it meant for New York City, and I specifically ordered the creation of the food reserve. I will happily tell you, Yoav, that my fears were not realized, that the supply chain held. There were some glitches along the way, but nothing profound. The supply chain held. The bigger problem we had in New York City was people buying in large quantities and stores taking more time to get stocked, but not that there wasn't a constant flow of food and other supplies coming in. So it makes sense when we have immediate needs to draw off that reserve to some extent, but we should keep, we're not done yet as a city or as a nation with this crisis. So we do need to keep a certain amount of reserve, and we will for sure.
The next is Mariah from the Washington Post.
Mariah, can you hear me?
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I'm working on a story about the families that have actually chosen remote learning. And I was wondering if you were surprised that so many families, particularly in the Black and Latinx community, chose to do remote and why you thought that might be.
You know, Mariah, it's a good question. I think the whole impact of this crisis is part of the reason. Communities of color have been hit the hardest here and have gone through hell, and so many families have lost family members. it makes sense that there would be real concern and real caution. At the same time, I will tell you, obviously, the vast majority of our school children are from communities of color. And we have hundreds of thousands of families, like we saw this morning in Elmhurst, Queens, that want their kids back in school. So I am not surprised at all that a lot of people wanted to start with remote out of an abundance of caution. I'm not surprised by the many, many people who want their kids back in school for many reasons, including, that they have to get back to work or they really think it's best for the kids' education. But in November, there is the opportunity for families to then decide if they want to bring their kids back into the school setting. And I think some families want to see, at least a month or more of evidence before they make that decision. And we're going to be able to show them something that I think will be compelling. And I won't be surprised if a number of families make that choice in November to come back in. Go ahead, Mariah.
Yeah, and one of the things that I heard from several families is they said that they think that you're putting the economy ahead of their children's lives, and that they think that you're using their children basically as guinea pigs. And I'm curious just to hear your response to
Mariah, obviously, if you know the work I've done and the Chancellor's done, and the Chancellor's literally devoted his entire life to kids, and we've talked about this question 100 or more times. Someone who has devoted his life to children, if he had said, I'm not comfortable opening schools, that would have been very, very crucial, and it's been the opposite. He feels, I won't speak for him, he's sitting right here, you'll chime in, but he feels strongly the value of in-person education. I feel it as someone, as a public school parent myself, as someone who worked on education issues now over the last 20 years, that we really ended up cheating a whole lot of kids in the last months of last year, not because anyone meant to, but because remote just couldn't give them what they needed, especially less privileged kids. And the notion of doing that again for a full school year, to me, was really, really unfair. But Mariah, we set it up as an optional system, and that's where I think it's really an unfair criticism. If we said, you have to come to the school building, in September, or you don't get an education, people could make that point. But we've said to parents, it's your choice. It's your choice. And if you want all remote, it's there for you. But we remember, we surveyed parents, and overwhelmingly they said they wanted the choice. They wanted school buildings open. And I think the people spoke. If the parents had said, no, we all want remote, that would have been a very different discussion. But a clear majority wanted school in person for their kids. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would only add, I agree with everything that you said, but the evidence is overwhelmingly clear that the best environment for a child is in a school environment with a well-trained, caring teacher and the support systems that come with in-person learning. The benefit that we have in New York City, having been the epicenter of the epicenter in March, but through the hard work of my fellow New Yorkers, we've been able to suppress this virus to a level that makes it possible for us to have in-person learning. We can't squander that opportunity. Children are in pain. They've been traumatized. I get a lot of emails, but I'll never forget the email that I got from a parent who has a child with disabilities who talked about explained to me in great detail how her child had regressed and how her child was being harmed by not being able to be in person, not receive those services in person, and how overjoyed she was that there would be an opportunity for her child now to be back in school. So again, we hear from a lot of parents, but it just breaks my heart as an educator, the thought of any child not being served. And as the mayor has said, this is a choice system that we set up, so parents can make that decision, and we honor that decision. But I can tell you, we saw a whole bunch of parents this morning, the mayor and I, who were overjoyed with their children having the opportunity to be in person again, and teachers that were overjoyed to welcome children back. Strange times for all of us, but that's one thing that just doesn't change.
That's for sure. Go ahead.
The next is Bob Henley from the Chief Leader.
Good morning.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Very good, sir. I was speaking with Harry Nispoli, chair of the MLC, and he mentioned that there was a thought among the unions that considering all that's going on now, that you consider taking off the table layoffs until after the election because there could be such a radical change in the atmospherics.
Bob, thank you for the question. I think I'm a huge fan of Harry Nespoli. We have worked really closely together for years now, and under his leadership, the MLC has really worked with us to find savings, including health savings that have been crucial. I understand what he's suggesting to you. I fear that we have to think about this beyond just the election. So I think the problem we're all experiencing here is that help just hasn't come from where we expected it to. We expected it to come from Washington in the stimulus. We expected it to come from Albany in the form of long-term borrowing. It hasn't. The clock is running. Now, our labor colleagues have really been stepping up, trying to address the situation in Albany, working with us on other savings. I don't think we can keep putting off things constantly. We have to find some kind of solution as quickly as possible, and that's what we're still trying to do with labor. Go ahead.
Follow up. Council members Borelli and Carnegie did a press conference emphasizing the bipartisan support for a concept known as early retirement incentives, which would save hundreds of millions of dollars because so many of the more senior civil servants are at the highest end of the salary scale. Two, it would be eligible for those in the cohort that are most eligible from COVID exposure and possible death. And three, would avoid blowing up the young civil service families most likely to have small children who lose their health care in the midst of the pandemic. And by the way, tend to be far more diverse because of all the good work you've been doing with reaching out to a diverse nature of the population to fill these positions in the civil service.
Well, Bob, I appreciate that point, and you're right. Across the city workforce, we see more diversity, and obviously notable in many places like the NYPD, which is now majority people of color. We need to keep ensuring that the DOE continues to become more diverse in its workforce. So you're right, this has been a central concern. And it does bring us back to the early retirement question. I think early retirement as a policy is something we have to put into play. So I agree with those council members. In fact, I've spoken to the leadership of the legislature in Albany and many members of the legislature, and there's a strong consensus that early retirement will have to be part of this package. Now, the problem is, Bob, how much will it achieve given the savings we need? That's still a real open question. And it only saves you money if you're going to not replace the line. And this is the reality. If you provide the early retirement option, but then you need to go back and fill that same role with another person and pay their salary, you're not saving money. So it still comes down to how many jobs we're going to be able to save going forward and the services we need to provide to the people. So definitely a piece of the solution. It's not the whole solution, but early retirement will definitely be a piece of the solution.
We have time for two more for today. The next is Henry from Bloomberg.
Henry, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. How are you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm interested in the president's threat and your response to his threat. You said it was a campaign strategy of some kind. Could you illuminate on that a little bit, elucidate, whatever the word is? Tell me why, what he's intending to do with this threat politically.
I'll illuminate and elucidate. I think, Henry, it's all about race, and it's all about attempts to divide and to enthrall his base by attacking the other. This is what this guy does. It's the only trick in his book. You got to go back to the 1980s when he called for the execution of the Central Park Five. This guy, remember who taught him? Roy Cohn, Joe McCarthy's right-hand man. I mean, we just got to get real about this guy. It is always divide and create hatred and move people to vote based on that hatred. So, he turns his attention to urban areas, which he wants to associate with people of color. In another way, of course, he wants to associate with Democrats and progressives. He treats them as the other. He tries to convince a lot of people in this country that we all are the problem, and he will save his voters from all of us. There's just no president in history who's been this irresponsible and divisive, but it's the only trick he knows. So he long ago could have decided to serve everyone or try and create a broad coalition. He hasn't. It's just a base strategy. It's the only thing he does. But he can't back it up. He's been threatening to take away our funding more times than I can count, and we beat him in court every time, or they just go away because they don't have a leg to stand on. So pure campaign strategy. That's what I'm seeing. Go ahead, Henry.
Okay. And in terms of this strategy, why would he? Let me rephrase this. Why? What's the strategy to counter his strategy? And if he did withhold money, would New York be pressed in defending his private property holdings that he owns in New York? Or is New York completely reimbursed for all of the protection that he receives from New York City police?
Okay, I'm not sure I got that fully at the end there. John, I'm going to turn to Jim Johnson on that piece, and then I will speak to how you address the strategy. But Jim, did you understand that question, or you want it restated? The part about the legal ramifications. We can't hear you. Jim, speak up.
I'm speaking up. Okay, and I'm off mute. As I understood the question, it was directed at reimbursement of city funds in connection with the protection of the president, and typically the MOUs between the NYPD and the Secret Service do provide for some form of reimbursement. More broadly, this is not a case where in response to a threat of federal funds, we could go after the president's personal properties here. But we'll take them on in court, and we'll make sure that our funds and our funding streams are protected. They have lost before, we've prevailed before, we will do it again.
Hey, Jim, maybe just another moment on the sort of the constitutional theory here would be helpful, or the Supreme Court decisions or whatever would help everyone to understand why we are so convinced this is unconstitutional action.
There are actually two pieces to it, one of which is the president doesn't control the purse strings of the federal government. That's set by Congress. He can't undo those and simply direct funds where he wants to, or withhold funds when he wants to. So that is a core principle that's connected with Congress's control over the federal purse. And secondly, he can't simply use in an act of, essentially this would be a high-tech heist, try to use federal funds to coerce cities and states, which is what clearly he's attempting to do.
A high-tech heist. Well said, Jim. And Henry, to the last piece there, look, I think the answer when you confront hatred is to overcome it with a positive vision of a country working together for a common cause, particularly as we're fighting back through this pandemic. I think people are hungry for a positive vision. They're hungry for a sense that there can be unity. They're just fatigued by all the negativity and hatred coming from President Trump. And of course, on top of that, something I think Joe Biden understands deeply, speak to working people about their lives and what they need. And people need to hear a vision of how they'll have health care for their families, how they will have jobs again that they can live on. This is an area I think Joe Biden can be very, very strong on, because everyone understands he empathizes with working people. And I think that combination, hope and unity on the one hand, and a vision of a nation that's actually devoted to working people again, is the winning formula.
We still have time for two more for today. The next is Rima from Chalkbeat.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and Chancellor Carranza and everyone on the call. I have two schools related questions. My first one is just a follow up on learning bridges. I heard the answers from before. I just wanted though to press a little bit further. Just wondering, we knew that this is a general timeline for instruction to begin, and I'm wondering why weren't seats opened up? Why weren't more seats ready for teachers who are going back to work, who don't have children in pre-K but still need childcare? Like, why has there been a delay in providing those folks with seats starting today?
Yeah, Rima, I'll start and I'll turn to Deputy Chancellor Wallach. The fact is, again, Learning Bridges was being created from scratch on a very, very tight timeline. And making sure that we could build this out aggressively, quickly, safely, it's been a really challenging endeavor, but we're getting there and the numbers are really going to grow. In terms of the specific timing, obviously the central focus has been students. We clearly want to support the professionals of the DOE that need to have their kids somewhere, but the central focus was been on families and their kids and aligning learning bridges to when school programs began. And that's where the numbers would be, not as much, of course, with the children of DOE staff. So I think that's the central reason it moved with the opening of each level of school. But the Deputy Chancellor can add to that.
No, thank you. And just to underscore, the fundamental purpose of the program is to give a safe and nurturing environment for children to be in while they're not able to be in school buildings or programs because of social distancing requirements. And so we brought our preschool programs on today so that students who are not able to be in their home preschool program will have a safe and nurturing place to be the rest of the week. And next week, we will bring the school-age seats on, and we will have opportunities available for close to 30,000 children by next week. I think the other piece to keep in mind is that, again, we are targeting certain neighborhoods that were hardest hit by the pandemic, and certain groups. And again, those are families in temporary housing, families residing in New York City Housing Authority development, children in family foster care or receiving child welfare services, students with disabilities, children of essential workers, and children of DOE school and program staff, including the staff of Learning Bridges itself. We'll be working to bring these sites on as quickly as possible. We are trying to match them with particular schools so that we can keep cohorts of children together, and that's another complexity of standing a program like this up in a pandemic that we just need to keep in mind. When we launched Pre-K for All, we put seats everywhere and any child could go to any seat. In this case, on an even tighter timeline, we're trying to stand up sites that are matched to particular schools so we can keep cohorts of kids together. And that being said, we'll still have tens of thousands of seats soon. We're going to be reaching out to families, and you'll hear from us within 48 hours if you email us. And over the coming weeks, we'll have many, many more opportunities available. We want to serve everybody who needs it. We're going to get there. We're going to get there over time.
Rima.
Thanks. My second question is about devices for kids. I'm hearing from many schools, principals, teachers, and a couple of parents who have said that their schools have not been able to provide devices for everybody who's requested one for this fall. And it seems that some of, a couple of people have said they just can't afford it from their budget, but the other issue I'm hearing about is that school leaders themselves just weren't aware until about mid-August that they'll now be responsible for fulfilling these requests, that it's not going to just come from the DOE. And then that sort of delayed their ordering of devices. And now the schools that have been able to afford it are just waiting on delivery. And so it sounds like, there's a chunk of kids at their schools who might be able to use like a parent's cell phone or something, but then there's a number of kids who they're not even sure are going to be able to log on as they wait for the device to come in. And it's for a variety of reasons, it sounds like broken devices, or they've decided they don't want to share with two siblings anymore. So I'm just wondering here, I know the chancellor talked a little bit about this last week, but can you explain from your understanding, why this device gap still exists, and how is the DOE helping schools figure this out quickly as we start the school year?
Okay, I'll start, Rima, and pass to the chancellor. Look, I am certain when it comes to technology that there'll be times where we got to replace a child's technology, or something went wrong with a shipment. Those things are clearly going to happen, and we want to address them every single time. And the chancellor will speak to the transition of coming back to school and what was the responsibility of schools versus DOE Central. But I want to make sure we put the horse before the cart here. You're talking about, and I find it strange, honestly, the question about the child who either their device isn't working, or something was wrong with the internet service, or they couldn't get a device. Those are all inherently valid questions, but I rarely hear the focus be on the fact that New York City did something that I don't know if it's been done on anything like this scale anywhere else, and said any child who needed a high quality device and the internet service with it for free would get it. And that happened in a matter of weeks in the spring, in the middle of the pandemic. And I give the chancellor and his team a lot of credit. That was a Herculean effort. The pure egalitarianism of that effort was striking. There was no means test. There was no quibbling. It was just, if you need it, we're going to get it to you. And that spirit continues now. It is different when you have a whole school system up and running than when you're doing everything remotely. But I do want to come back to the sheer consistency of the effort to make sure that every kid has in real time what they need. So go ahead, Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Rima, and congratulations on your award. Hadn't spoken to you since you got it. Congratulations. Look, we estimate there's over 900,000 devices, including the 320,000 devices that we've already loaned out to students that the mayor was talking about when we pivoted to remote learning. We have more devices that we've stocked for those circumstances in which students need, either they have a broken device or for whatever reason their circumstances have changed. We notified schools in July that they would be handling the distribution instead of a centralized distribution that we had in March. Now, just to remind folks, we had to do a centralized distribution and a delivery method because we were all staying at home. And schools were not open. So it just makes sense now that schools will be open for in-person learning, that they will be the distribution sites. That being said, we also continue to order devices as well. And families, I'm going to encourage families to be in touch with their school communities. In fact, last week when we had the orientation days, they were precisely for this reason, so that families could connect with schools. If they needed a device or they needed anything else, the school would be aware and prepared to provide that for the student. So again, stay in touch with your school communities. We're working very closely with our schools, and we will not let a student that needs a device not have a device.
Amen.
Last question today goes to Kala from PICS.
Hey there, good morning. The DOE login page was down at 9 a.m. this morning for 10 minutes, affecting Zoom and TeachHub. And you guys had tweeted that you were able to fix it. But what do you say to remote learning parents and students who are frustrated with technology? Because we heard about some issues last week also with a school working outside because their internet wasn't working for orientation.
Look, I'll start and pass to the chancellor. We've really been focused on the whole range of issues around technology. We obviously spoke about getting kids devices who need them. We've been focused on cybersecurity. I want to thank everyone who's been a part of that effort to protect the DOE on the cyber level. We also have been in touch with the key providers, Zoom and others, to make sure their capacity was sufficient for handling the restart of New York City public schools. And all the companies involved have been confident. There's clearly going to be problems sometimes, but structurally, I think we're in good shape. Chancellor, you take it.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate the context. Yes, at 9 o'clock for about 10 minutes, there was some difficulty with the login page. It was very quickly remedied. It's up and running, so Zoom, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, all the other platforms are up and running, and we're monitoring that. I think it's a good example of how it's all hands on deck. The mayor's referred to the war room, where any issue is immediately escalated so that we are able to get on it. We got on it within 10 minutes. Everything's working. I'm also going to encourage any parents or students that have any questions to go to schools.nyc.gov/tech support. And that's for any question, whether it's a logon question, whether it's an ID question, a student ID, student email, you'll be able to get the support that you need there. But again, I think the systems are working. We're identifying any glitches and resolving them immediately.
Go ahead, Kala.
All right. And then, Mayor, I wanted to follow up on Bloomberg's question regarding the president and what's going on with New York City. Do you believe that President Trump is racist?
I'm very sad, Kala, to have to say this. I've believed for a long time that President Trump is racist, and it's sad. It's sad. It's not something anyone should take joy in saying about the person who holds the highest office in the land, but it's true. It's true in what he's been doing throughout his life. He's always tried to racially divide this country. And he's trying to appeal to the notion that somehow America's going to go back in time and be an all-white country. And first of all, it never was. Second of all, no, we're going to be a more diverse country with every passing day. In the not-too-distant future, we're going to be a majority people of color country. We should be proud of that. We should embrace who we are. We should embrace the fact this country is great because of all of our people coming together over generations. But no, he doesn't like it. He doesn't like that reality. And he's tried to very cynically appeal to people who are scared of that evolution of our country and use that fear to win votes. And it's really disgusting, but that's who he is. All right, let's turn to a better topic at the ending, which is our parents, our kids. The fact that this morning we saw, again, pure joy, pure hope, pure possibility. If you want to be inspired, just go outside one of our schools as kids are coming in to start the day, as teachers are welcoming them, as parents are saying goodbye to their kids and wishing them a good day in school. And it's enthralling because you see this city fighting back, coming back, and you see our kids getting what they need. They yearn for that chance to get into school again. I mean, the kids this morning, they were really, there was something to watch. They were ready. 4-year-olds, they were ready. They were filled with energy. And, you know, we all know, anyone who's brought a 4-year-old to school, is sometimes you get tears and sometimes you get hesitation. I don't know, maybe these kids felt cooped up over these last months because I didn't see a lot of tears, I didn't see a lot of hesitation. I saw kids ready to go, and I saw educators ready to go, and school staff ready to go. And it's an inspiration for this whole city. So we're going to start this week strong, and next week's going to be even bigger, and we're going to go on from there and keep bringing this city back. Thank you, everybody.